should.
I should
What's your
definitely
test, 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 test.
Ça fonctionne, Nicolas, merci.
Ouais, mais on n'a pas de vidéo.
Tu vois pas la salle?
Non.
Ok, attends. Est-ce que tu vois la salle dans le WebEx du coup maintenant?
Non, attends, je vais juste switch pour voir si c'est pas ça. Non, rien.
Attends, la config est là.
Écran noir. Black screen.
Attends, je crois que la config elle a sauté dans la salle.
Oh, génial. On voit la salle maintenant.
Hi. Yes, of course. Yes. Hello, everybody. I think we can start. Yes? We can start. Okay. Just wait a minute. My name is Joanna Scheuring-Wielgus. I'm from Poland. I am MP from a Social Democracy parliamentary group here in the European Parliament. And I am very happy to be here today to introduce the 8th edition of the Contraception Policy Atlas Europe. Since 2017, we have been sharing this map to show and compare contraception policies across Europe. I say we because I have the pleasure of working with European Parliamentary Forum since many years, because when I was Polish MPs, I organized event like that, like we have today in Polish Parliament, and I'm happy I am presenting here in the European Parliament. And at the beginning, I wanted to say thank you to all the group of European Parliamentary Forum and to Neil Datta for the amazing work, because I think that this is absolutely amazing work the European Parliamentary Forum is doing. Coming back to this atlas, the Contraception Atlas covers all of Europe, including non-European countries, and looks at access to contraception, counseling, and information. The atlas is released around Valentine's Day to remind people that this is not just the day about flowers and chocolates, but also about discussing sexual pleasure, women's empowerment, and control our bodies. Everyone in Europe should have access to the best healthcare, but as you will see, this access is not the same in every country. Like I mentioned before, I am from Poland, and I don't want to share all the details now about the situation in Poland and about the information about this atlas, but like a Polish woman, and most importantly for me as a mother, I feel it is important to highlight Poland's position in this report. I remember, Neil, when we presented this atlas in Polish Parliament 2017, it was shocked for me that Poland was mentioned like a dark red. And the dark red shows how bad the situation in Poland is. And unfortunately, the situation still is not good, and it is not clear. And I'm not happy with that, because we still don't have a possibility to access for the contraception. We don't have a possibility to have access to emergency contraception, and we don't have a possibility to have access to the information about contraception. And this is Poland. 2025, unfortunately. However, these issues faced by Poland are not the unique. They are a part of a larger ongoing problems across Europe. The World Health Organization has highlighted several challenges, including fewer contraception options, difficulty accessing services, especially for young, poor or unmarried people, fear of side effects, cultural or religion opposition, poor quality services, and gender-based barriers. Access to contraception is an issue that the European Parliament has discussed many times, and it comes at a critical moment with the release of the Commission's roadmap for women's rights. We have a commission now, and I will back after the meeting, but I think this is a very crucial moment for that. The roadmap includes sexual and reproductive health and rights as a part of its framework, ensuring that the issue remains a crucial topic in the ongoing discussion and action. Now, more than ever, when we see the situation on the world, we must continue fighting for meaningful reform, not just only in Poland, of course, but for all women across Europe. I hope today we will help to start important conversation about the changes we need, particularly in countries where women's access to reproductive health is becoming more limited, as we reflected in this year's report. And now I am very happy that we have very good guests. We have my friends from European Parliament, Emma, Rafowicz, yes, and Raquel Garcia Hermida. We have close to me Neil Datta, who will present the map, Executive Director of the European Parliamentary Forum. I hope we will have Maud Boey and Marina Davidashvili, who will talk about contraception trends and the challenges young people in Europe face today. But now I think it's the time for Leonidas Galeridis, who will have a test about knowledge of contraception. Leonidas, it's your time. It's time for you now.
Hello. So welcome. Welcome everybody here. So as an introduction to the presentation from the speakers, I invite you to enter a link. It's to make a short quiz to test your contraception knowledge. So you have to type menti.com. That's the link. Also online for the ones that are watching us, they can type menti.com. And as soon as you type menti.com, you will see a space to put a code. So you have to type the following code. It's 7767 7546. So I will repeat it because we have a technical problem, like we cannot screen that right now. So you have to go to menti.com. It's menti.com. And after there will be a small space, you have to enter the following code: 7767 7546 all together. Yes.
Yes, are you okay?
So
yeah.
The website you have to go, it's menti.com. So it's menti.com, and the code is 7767 7546.
Okay. Maybe we will show you. Maybe we will show you Menti.
Yes, menti.com. I can see that already 44 players have joined. So we can wait a little more. I will repeat it one more time. So the website is menti.com, and the code is 7767 7546. Okay, so we have 50 players online now. So I will start the quiz. So first question, you will see it on your screens. you have to answer fast to get more points. What is the most used form of contraception in Europe according to the UN? And you can see the following answers: male condom, the pill, IUD, or implant. So you have to choose the correct answer the quickest possible to get the most points. So you can see the correct answer is the pill. 14 people found it. Most of the corresponders chose the male condom. So that's a common misconception. Let's go to the second question. Perfect. So the second question is the following. Which of the below contraceptive methods is the most reliable according to WHO? So you can see the answers: male condoms, the pill, spermicide, or the implant, or LARC. So you have to choose which is the most reliable contraceptive method. And the correct answer is the implant, and 26 out of 50 you found it. So the majority didn't know that, although a lot of people thought that it was a pill. We go for the third out of the 6 questions. And oh, sorry, that was okay. So, which country saw the most score increase since 2018, according to the European Contraception Policy Atlas? Portugal, Luxembourg, Slovenia, or Estonia? So that's a country that really did a big effort and progress in our atlas. So the correct answer is Luxembourg, and that was a tough one because a lot of people chose Portugal and Estonia. So let's go to the fourth question out of 6. So the question is, how many countries provide emergency contraception free of charge at pharmacies or public facilities? 3, 8, 14, or 22 out of the 48, 47 that we researched. So the correct answer is 8, and that was also tough one. A lot of you said 3 and 14. So it's 8 countries only, unfortunately. We can go to the 5th question now. So how many European countries have excellent public websites about contraception? 9, 11, 17, or 23? So that's something that our atlas always scores. It's online reliable information to citizens. And the correct answer is 11. So a lot of you found it, but still it was a tough question. And the 6th and the last question is not so much as of a question, but more like a space for expression. So we would like to ask you, what makes a good contraceptive policy? No, that's a question. That's reimbursement, accessible online information, free consultation, or all of the above. So that's that should not be so difficult. It's basically what the atlas is measuring, and almost all of you correct. It's all of the above. And now we are done with the questions and what I said before. Last one, we would like to ask you, what would you ask a member of the European Parliament, like as we are here in the European Parliament premises, on contraception policy? So you have to like freely express your thoughts about that. What do you think? It's just a minute. Yes, that a member of the European Parliament could do on contraceptive policy, like yes. So that's a free space for you to write. you can think about maybe changes policies on reimbursement, or maybe doing something more common across European countries to have maybe some more common policies. And also you can think about online information. Yes. So we received some responses here, around 15, 16 responses. And now there is a second, you can have half a minute to vote. You can see the answers on your screen and you can choose which one you agree on, even if you did not express your thought before. And now we can see the answers here. So yeah, so some of the answers like free contraception for everyone, awareness raising on male focused contraceptives, to more education on contraception technologies, how to give access to more vulnerable population, how to involve women organization in enlargement countries in these joint efforts, and high quality comprehensive sexuality education. And now we will see the winners, and we have prepared some gifts for the 3 best winners. So let's see. So first winner is let's see here. It's Emma Rafowicz. Yes. The second is Laura, and third is Casper. So if you can, yeah, come. I don't know if you are in the room. If you are in the room, you can come here to give you a present. Second is Laura, and third is Casper. Yes. Sorry. The fourth one is Anna Greta, who was the fastest one as well.
Who is Anna?
Sorry. It's okay. We can find me to get after, and I can give you the present. So thank you very much for your participation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leonidas, and I think it's time for Neil Datta, who will presenting our new Contraception Policy Atlas Europe 2025.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you, Leo, for that warm up with the game, and congratulations to the winner, to our co-host. But from what I hear, our 2 other co-hosts, I think it's good that they're here, because from what the feedback I got from their answers was that they may need a little bit of awareness raising. So I just want to start by thanking the members of the European Parliament, Joanna, Raquel, Emma, for hosting us. As Joanna pointed out, this is the 8th edition that we're doing here in the European Parliament, and we always do it around Valentine's Day, so as to have a nice positive message around contraception and family planning, so that we all know what happens on Valentine's Day, and this is probably one of the occasions where we all sort of get why we may need family planning and contraception, So we've been presenting this for 8 years now, and we have some updates for this year. So I'll take us through the slides, and the gods of technology in the European Parliament are with us, so that we do have PowerPoint, which we didn't have 3 minutes ago. So we'll take advantage of this brief window of opportunity of technological work, that technology is working with us. So next slide, please. So first, why is contraception important? Well, just as a reminder of some of the basics, increased use of effective contraception contributes to fewer unintended pregnancies. Then fewer unintended pregnancies leads to fewer abortions. And Europe has both the highest contraceptive prevalence rates in the world and the lowest abortion rates in the world. And so we're doing relatively okay compared to other parts of the world, but progress has been uneven. And the progress that we decide to make is, in fact, a political decision. This is why we're meeting in this house. Next slide. If we just take a little look into more details behind these numbers, okay? So even though we're doing relatively well compared to many other parts of the world, it's still more than a third of all pregnancies in Europe which are unintended, okay? So more than a third, with the highest numbers being in the Russian Federation and Romania, and the lowest in Albania and Montenegro. And then on average, it is 57% of women in Europe who use some form of modern contraception, again, with huge disparities, with the highest contraceptive prevalence rates in Finland, Switzerland, the UK, and France, and the lowest in Montenegro and Albania. Next slide. If we then go a little bit into the types of contraception, okay? And here we're comparing the most popular types of contraception compared to the most effective types of contraception. The most popular ones are the pills, contraceptive pills, we're all familiar with that, male condoms, and then IUDs, intrauterine devices. But then you compare this with what are the most effective ones. We have the first of them, implants, then sterilization, that's very effective, and then finally IUDs. So we can see that there's a mismatch in terms of the most used ones and the most effective ones, except in the case of IUDs. Next slide. So why the Contraception Atlas? So it's because of these discrepancies, the regional discrepancies that we'll get into later, and also what is most used versus what is most effective, and then also the relatively high number of unintended pregnancies, which brings us to the need for a contraception atlas. So this atlas looks at the big Europe, not just the EU, and it's meant to track how governments perform in a whole range of different areas of contraceptive policies. We take a look at three main areas: access to supplies, then counseling, and then online information as a proxy for what is all the information out there about contraception. Okay. Next slide. And in this respect, we are accompanied by a group of experts from different horizons. So we have the first there, Petra Bayer, who is a member of parliament from Austria, also at the Council of Europe. We have professional organizations who know what they're talking about in terms of women's health, reproductive health, etc. We have a young person also, Boey, who's sharing the panel with us today. We have pharmaceutical partners also. We have Chris from Organon, who is part of our esteemed expert group, as well as civil society organizations, women's groups, etc. So you can see here a rather diverse group of experts. And it changes a little bit every year, we update it. Next slide. And then if we take a look at what we're really looking at in terms of determining the score for each country, okay? You have three main broad categories: access to supplies, access to counseling, and then availability of online information. Okay, so you have all the different subcategories there. We have 17 of them in total. You'll find them on the back of the atlas. Okay, so if you want to go into detail into each one of them and how your country scores, turn to the flip side and you can see for yourself. Okay, and now we've added a new category this year, which is that of emergency contraception, whether it's covered or not. Okay. And so this is why you will see that some scores have evolved over the previous year, even though you may not be aware of any other changes in your country. And in fact, you will see that it's becoming a bit more competitive once more. Next slide. So here we have the Contraception Atlas for 2025. So I'll give you a minute to look at this. I know that in previous editions of the Contraception Atlas presentation in the European Parliament, it was usually hosted by a former colleague of yours, Sophie Inneveld. She used to refer to this as the Eurovision of sexual health. In that usually what happens when people see the atlas, they zoom in on their country, and then they start looking at neighboring countries and then asking whether this makes sense. So Joanna probably zooming in on Poland and then taking a look at other countries Czech Republic, Germany, and others, and wondering why is it that they're doing better, what are we doing wrong, etc. And I'm sure that many of us are doing the same thing from our own respective countries. And this process of asking questions then opens the door for finding different policy solutions to improve performance. And we know that this has worked relatively well. So here we see that it's the situation has become more competitive with countries that used to be in green last year. Now they're in yellow. So it's a good thing. We're refining this. And unfortunately, the countries at the bottom remain the same. Last year, we had done a simulation about what Poland would look like if it had implemented the policies that were currently being under consideration in the Polish Sejm. And we would have seen Poland go from the dark red, this color of red that we had at the time to invent just for Poland, would have evolved into yellow. But as we see, there's no changes. And it's not because of lack of political will, but it's always easier to destroy something than to create something new. And we're seeing just how difficult it is to really do something positive in a country where things have been eroded so far. So we'll go into the details of what does this mean. Okay, what does this map mean? Next slide. So in terms of the champion countries, we have a cluster of 5 champion countries. We have France, Luxembourg, UK, Portugal, and Belgium. And now, those of you who remember previous atlases, you'll remember that France, Luxembourg, UK, and Belgium have always been at the top. And it's usually a competition between those countries, which one will turn out to be the winner. But now we can add Portugal to the list. So that's a good development. Then you have a cluster of 9 countries who are in the good category. So we have the Netherlands and the Nordic countries, Albania, Estonia, Germany. Then you have a big middle category of just medium countries. These are all the yellow ones, closely followed by 8 countries in the poor category. And then we go into very poor. And when we go into very poor, then we start seeing the geographical differences, because that is really Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe goes from very poor to exceptionally poor for Poland, Russian Federation, Hungary, and for some reason that we don't quite understand, Cyprus is in there as well, despite the fact that it was the previous health commissioner that came from Cyprus. Next slide. So in terms of the best performing countries, okay, so we have this cluster of 5 countries. Basically, the top ones are France and Luxembourg, tied for first place. Then we have the United Kingdom in second place, and then we have Portugal in third place. What do they have? Okay, and Belgium also we're putting in that really good category. What do they have? They have coverage systems for adults within the national health system, which include long-term reversible contraception and emergency contraception. Also, all of these countries have special arrangements for young people and vulnerable groups to access contraception either very cheaply or freely. Accessible free consultations, good government-supported websites. And this is important to keep in mind, because when young people want to start considering using contraception, what will they do? They'll go onto their phones, just like all of us, whenever we have a question. And so there needs to be information accessible online for young people to be able to start understanding how it is that they should begin this journey. And then also we have free or partially covered emergency contraception that is available over the counter. So this is one of the new things that we're looking at. So this is what makes the champion countries what they are. Next slide. So the worst performing countries. So we have Poland, Hungary, Russian Federation, and Cyprus. So one thing we need to note is that 3 of the 4 worst performing countries are within the European Union. Okay, and so what makes them so poorly performing? No coverage schemes for adults within the national health system, no special arrangements for young people or vulnerable groups, consultations are not or insufficiently covered by the national health systems, there's no available government-supported online information, and emergency contraception requires a prescription, particularly in Poland. And that goes against the very notion of why we need emergency contraception. Next slide. So if we take a look at some of the evolutions over this past year, okay, there's been some progress, but we'll also take a look at the evolution over the past 5 years, okay, because that's more indicative of the trajectory. In Austria, they launched a pilot project in one of their federal states, in Vorarlberg, for free contraception, and it started just this past autumn in December 2024, in the autumn of 2024. In Ireland, increase of contraceptive coverage program for young people up until the age of 35, up previously from 31 years of age. And then in Luxembourg, they looked at the issue of sterilization and removed the mandatory reflection period for vasectomy or tubal ligation. This is an old thing that goes back to the probably to the Napoleonic era, because it's similar to what France used to have. And in Turkey, next slide, yep. They've started providing free contraception to the vulnerable groups. And in Turkey, the vulnerable groups is mainly the Syrian refugees that have come in by the millions across the border. So that's basically the group that they're providing contraception to. Next slide. If we then take a look at online information provision, we can see that there's some positive developments in a range of different countries: Armenia, Czech Republic, Latvia, Portugal. And in fact, it's because of what Portugal did, where the governmental supported website on access to contraception followed our guidelines so that they were able to climb in the score in the ranking for this year. Next slide. But there has been, as you saw, a persisting divide between East and West. And we'll take a look now at the evolutions over the past 5 years. Okay. Next slide. So the main thing over the past 5 years has been the extension of contraceptive coverage for young people. And now this really, we see it's almost like a trend that we have been seeing mainly in Western Europe. Starting in Belgium, France, Ireland, and then Luxembourg beat everyone by making it universal coverage for everybody. Okay, but I remember a number of years ago, the way that this started was that we had released the contraception atlas, and France and Belgium were both the top scorers of that year. And then it was the Belgian organization Sensoa who tweeted to the then Minister of Health saying, "Congratulations, Belgium, on being #1 with France. Here are 3 suggestions for how we can beat France next year." And the Belgian Minister of Health took up a certain number of them, and then effectively, Belgium beat France the following year. And then after that, France was going to hold the EU presidency of the European Union, the EU presidency. And apparently the Macron government asked the French organizations, including Le Planning, the French family planning organization, what can we do to show that France is really committed to women's health, etc. And so then the Planning said, well, Belgium just beat us on this atlas last year. If you make contraception free for all the young people, then we can do something, we can catch up to Belgium. And then Macron announced this during the French presidency of the EU. And so then France caught up. And then Luxembourg got into the mix of it and then became champion last year. So we can see there's a little positive competition going on there. But unfortunately, as you can see here, this competition stays restricted within certain countries, and we need to get others to start playing the game as well. Next slide. If we take a look at some of the negative trends, though, unfortunately, in some countries, we haven't seen any change. Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is a partner, a pre-accession partner, there's not been any change. So this is something maybe that we need to start engaging in a political dialogue with that country. Russian Federation, no change, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to get better, the Russian Federation, anytime soon. We've had a worsening situation in terms of online information in Cyprus and in Hungary. In Hungary, we can understand why. It fits with the political line of the country. We need to wonder what's happening in Hungary. And then also difficulty in terms of accessing emergency contraception in Poland, despite a lot of efforts to change that. And next slide. So overall, what we see is that if we take all the different indicators together, what we're finding is that it's a story of stagnation and improvement in some countries. So in terms of countries that cover contraceptives in their national health systems, including the long-acting reversible ones, we see that that has remained stable at about just under half of all the countries, 47%. Countries which provide contraceptives in the national health system for young people, that's also just under 30%. But 46 countries, 94% of them provide counseling within the national health system. So that's a good thing. And a number of countries, 11 countries, 23% provide excellent or excellent websites about how to access information about contraception. Now, this online information is perhaps the easiest thing for countries to do, because no matter how poor a country is in the European region, there is no country so poor that it cannot provide good online information to its own people. And then also emergency contraception, 8 countries provide free of charge at the pharmacy or public health facilities. So you can see there's a lot of work to be done across the board in a number of areas. Next slide. So in terms of certain societal trends that we need to be aware of, one of them is the rise of fertility tracking apps. Okay. Now, these have developed a great deal over the past couple of years, and it's entirely normal. I mean, most of us now use our phone for our daily lives in almost everything, banking and whatever. So it's normal that women would want to also use this for fertility tracking. The thing is that there's some anecdotal evidence which is coming out which suggests that some women, younger women, are preferring menstrual tracking apps to using actual contraception. And this may be having a small effect on abortion rates in those cases being studied. So I think this is something we need to take a look at. Also, with these fertility tracking apps, some of them are fake fertility tracking apps. And what they are actually devised by actors who are close to religious extremist movements. And they may be, these apps are designed in order to disinform women about their fertility and access to contraception. One of them is unfortunately funded by the European Union. And so I think this is something we need to keep a close look at. And then another one is evolving contraceptive behavior of adults. There's one study that came out in Germany where it looks like condoms are beginning to replace the contraceptive pill as the most used type of contraception. So we go from the not the most effective to even less effective type of contraception. And then there's an increasing number of women who seem to think that that the pill would have a negative effect on their bodies or mind. So I think we need to understand what's happening here and then make sure that there's a good amount of information available there, both about the most effective types of contraception, but about modern contraception overall. Next slide. So I'll end here. I've been talking quite a bit in terms of a certain number of key recommendations to take back. One is contraception is coverage of contraceptives within the national health systems, and it should include long-acting reversible contraception and emergency contraception. Next is ensuring accessible counseling for contraception, including rural or hard-to-reach areas. So the state needs to give some special thinking to that. Public health institutions must offer authoritative online information. There's a lot of disinformation out there. And usually the younger you are, and maybe we'll hear from Maud about this, the more reliant you are on online information and social media. And this is really the Wild West of anyone can say anything there. So we need to make sure that there's authoritative information out there that is evidence-based. And then finally, related to this is the emergence of new technologies in contraception. So one thing that we should be taking a look at is the potential use of artificial intelligence in providing advice and information, but also these fertility tracking apps, which are becoming more popular, and we need to get our heads around that. Okay, so I'll end here, and I'd just like to thank the expert group. Some of the expert group are here with us, the national partners, Organon, and also our co-host MEPs who are here with us. So thank you very much for your political leadership on this. Thank you.
Neil.
Thank you, Neil. And I would like to take the floor to Emma Rafowicz, who will, my friend from S&D Group, my friend from S&D Group, MP from France. And I would like to tell that unfortunately I have to go for FAM committee now, and I think Neil will help me with organize the meeting. Thank you very much. Emma, it's your.
Thank you, and I'll meet you later then in the FAM committee. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Maybe let me start by saying thank you to EPF for the work, to the expert group, and obviously thank you so much for the opportunity to host this event, because I feel more like it's a great invitation and also an invitation to act together. Until a few years ago, and I know that I am actually talking and I am seeing the map, which is on my desk, like before all of you, and I see my country on the top of the list. So obviously it's something that makes us proud, but also makes us reflect on a lot of things, because coming from France and also being obviously an MEP, but also a young woman, I actually don't believe that everything is perfect. And I wanted to reflect on that with all of you. Until a few years ago, obviously a woman in France who wanted to control her destiny, to control, well, her fertility, her body, would have to obviously go through a lot of things and struggles in her life. And sometimes she had to rely on chance to control what her fertility would be, more than control really her destiny. Contraception was a taboo, sometimes it still is, and it was a forbidden question in many families, in many areas. It was a sensitive question. It was thought, obviously, and it still is in many countries and sometimes in many areas by conservatives. And it was a subject that was ignored by institutions when it was not thought. It was a time when weight of tradition, prohibition, and social control weighed heavily on every woman's shoulders. It was a heavy and constant mental burden. Today, we live in obviously a different era, especially in France, but I want to say why we live in a different era. We live in a different era, not just because some politicians decided to, and I heard this story about Emmanuel Macron, and I hear it, but you have to know that the real winner of this story, the real hero, is actually the planning familial in this story, and that it was because we have, and we had, and we still have, a lot of feminist activists, a lot of feminist associations that a lot of battles were won. It was because of all of these women and men who dedicated their lives to, well, making us emancipated women and citizens that we can say right now that the situation is better. Not perfect, obviously, but better to control and to, well, have control over our own bodies. If we are gathered here today, I guess, though, it is not just to say that everything is perfect and that it is now better than before, because if it was just that, then we just could have a coffee together, and it will obviously be really great. And I see that we have coffee there, so maybe after. But I think that it is not enough, and we have to say what can be done now. Because still today, and even though I see the great number of 93.2% for France, even now we have, the battle is not over. The battle is not over because access to contraception remains unequal. Because too many young people, too many women in precarious situations, too many couples without sufficient information are still at a loss. Because conservatives in France, in Europe, in the entire world today are actually trying to win back a battle that they lost years ago. And it is with that in mind that I think we are gathered here today. Because obviously some of them are dreaming right now in France too, in Europe. We see them in our parliament. We see them in the FAM committee. Some of them are dreaming that the clock can be turned back, basically. So today I want to take stock on what works, on what doesn't work in my country, France, often pointed out, as I just said, as being ahead of the game, and on what we must demand together to guarantee every woman, every young person, the fundamental right to choose, basically, because it is what it is about. Today, we have a system in France where contraception is a right, where it is free for the youngest, and where it is accessible without justification. And it changes lives. I'm thinking of students who, thanks to free contraception until the age of 25, doesn't have to choose between her rent or paying for contraception. I'm thinking of a teenager who, after unprotected sex, didn't have to run to the pharmacy for a prescription, but was able to go straight to the pharmacy and get the morning after pill, the emergency contraception, free of charge. In France, it's often held up as an example when it comes to contraception, and it is thanks, obviously, to courageous political decisions and major legislative advances. When the Neuwirth law in '67 finally legalized contraception, it was not immediately applied. We had to wait. I wasn't there, but a lot of women had to wait 5 years for it to come into force. Then came in '74 the reimbursement of the pill, and then thanks to my comrade Martine Aubry in 2001, we had a fundamental win, which was the first time that it was asserted that minors could also decide that their access to contraception should no longer depend on the goodwill of a parent or a guardian. That every girl had the right to consult a doctor in complete confidentiality without having to justify herself. That sterilization for contraception was a personal choice too. In 2013, another barrier came down. Contraception became totally free for minors from the age of 15. This measure has had a direct impact on early pregnancies, which have fallen significantly. Then in 22, a major breakthrough again, free treatment is extended to all young women up the age of 25. Finally, in 23, the morning after pill became free for all without a prescription. All of these measures, obviously, and you can imagine that, are not just laws passed in an hemicycle. They made a real difference to the lives of millions of women. Today in France, 64% of French women aged 15 to 49 use a modern contraceptive method. It means fewer unwanted pregnancy. It means less distress. It means more freedom to choose. But, and I want to say that with obviously the knowledge that it is a better situation in France than in other countries, I want to say that we still have big challenges ahead. Many of them are political because, as I just said, conservatives are on the rise, and the freedom of choosing what is our fertility and what we do with our own bodies is obviously something that they want to fight. But I want to say what are for me right now the things that we can do to maybe approach the 100%, because obviously that's something that we can say is a goal. I think that today we must fight against territorial inequalities, which means that it can take several months for a woman in a rural area to get an appointment for a contraceptive prescription. It happens obviously because sometimes it is hard to find a healthcare professional in these areas. And I want to say that because a colleague of mine just told me this information today. In the Drôme department, next to Valence in France, we had 15 healthcare centers, and 7 of them now are closing. Not just because, obviously, healthcare professionals are leaving, but it is happening today because some people at the national level are making austerity decision for our national budgets, and it has obviously some really bad consequences for all of our bodies. And I think it's really important for us to point that out. Sometimes it is not just about conservatives and reactionaries, obviously they are there, but it is also about austerity and what it means then to do economical choices for women's bodies when we don't see the facts on territorial questions. Then I think that we must obviously tackle the subject of sex education and the subject of what happens for women when they are girls and what do we taught them in school. And obviously not just girls, but also boys. Too many people, too many young people today are still left with no information or not enough information, depriving them of the opportunity to choose their contraceptive method with full knowledge of the facts. And obviously this has been something that has been brought up before, but we should do more about the use of condoms today in France and everywhere in Europe. It is something that today is obviously being less and less used, and we have to say that it is something that we need to be talked more. We have a generation of people who were taught really sometimes aggressively that they should use condoms, especially because we were fighting the HIV epidemic. Now something about that discourse is maybe not as much pointed out, but I think that obviously we should talk about it more. Obviously we have a lot of things, but I don't want to be too long. I still maybe want to say something not so nice about Emmanuel Macron, but just let me say that. We had a really tough moment a few months ago. I think I didn't have a date in mind, but we were talking about how can we get our country strong? How can we get armed together? And something was mentioned being called demographic rearmament. I think that it is something really dangerous to make women's bodies something that needs to be controlled as a political movement or as a political strategy at a national level. Of course, I know what demography and demographic in society is all about, but making women and their bodies something that needs to be pressured on, and we know that our bodies are today very much under pressure, but to make them also under the weight of a political pressure that say that a good or a bad woman is whether you have a child or not, is something that I think is really, really dangerous. And maybe in conclusion, and it will be my last sentence, but more as a testimony, because I still want to say that obviously as a 29-year-old woman, I also have an experience with contraception, and it's obviously a really personal experience. It doesn't have to be universal, but I still want to share. I think a few years ago, I really went to the pharmacy looking for an emergency contraception, a morning after pill. I am a feminist. I have been for a very long time. I have my mother and really strong feminist to thank for that. However, and I think that's the case for a lot of women, I was utterly terrified walking up to the pharmacy. I was terrified when I went there, even though the professional there was absolutely nice and marvelous. I was terrified for 2 weeks after. I think I took 3 pregnancy tests just to be sure, which was completely, I mean, it made no sense, to be completely honest with you. But I was in a complete state of terror, just thinking about, could I be pregnant right now? And I think that's a feeling that a lot of women are feeling when they are facing those situations. And I think that we have a lot to do as a society to convince women that nothing is wrong when something actually goes wrong, that also we have a lot of spectrum to address, and that today, of course, we have to do more about that. And I think it starts in school. And also, today was talked about what contraception is used for women. And I was completely in awe realizing that the implant is actually something that is not chosen a lot by women. And I want to say that today, when you go to a gynecologist or sometimes a midwife, because we have to say that you can go to a midwife to get contraception. Sometimes the choice of the contraception you want is not the priority of some healthcare specialists that you have in front of you. And it's something that I feel should be said more in medical school and in university for those who train. I don't know if we do all of this, we get to 100%, but I hope that we can go there. It goes for France, but it goes obviously for the entire world. So better budget for health, and obviously, well, win the fight against conservative and religious people who are fighting today against our bodies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emma, for sharing your insights and your testimony. I'm taking over from Joanna with the moderation for now until maybe she comes. We'll see if she can come back. Excuse me. We're running a bit behind on the program, and I would still like to have some time for interaction with the audience. So if we could keep the presentations to the allocated time, that would be great. It's my great pleasure to introduce Maud. Do I say it right? Maud Boey. Boey, youth activist and board member from Sensoa, and also Marina Davidashvili, head of policy and research for the EPF, the European Parliamentary Forum for Sexual and Reproductive Rights, on the key findings from the report Contraceptive Use, I cannot speak anymore, busy and awareness among young people in the European region, to understand better how youth is looking to this subject and how we can make the most of that. Thank you. The floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for introducing me. It's funny seeing me up there. Since a week or two, there has been a new federal government installed in Belgium. Finally, reading through the agreement, this sentence about contraception caught my eye. Improve access to long-acting contraception by removing barriers in accessibility and affordability. This is truly a win for contraception advocates. As you can see on the atlas, and as we already discussed, Belgium is currently holding the 5th place, which is, for those who followed what Neil was saying, has been a bit of a setback after holding the 1st place for some years. So the fact that this sentence is in the agreement again shows that the government is taking up the task to regain the leading position in Europe after France, or, some challenges. And that is mainly because new legislation introduced the past few years actually paid off. After making the morning after pill accessible without a prescription, the usage amongst young people rose, a recent study showed. And with no clear increase in abortions, it was concluded that this emergency method was a welcome addition to the reimbursed contraception in Belgium. Besides that, the study also showed a decline in the use of the pill. This is not necessarily a bad thing because it can be attributed to multiple reasons. One of them being that girls and young women are exploring different types of contraception, which is actually a good evolution. For example, the IUD is on the rise amongst young Belgian women. And getting to know what options are out there and making a decision together with a healthcare provider is in fact the way to go. But next to that, there's a growing societal hormone fatigue or skepticism, as we already talked about. Women are speaking up, talking about their IUD horror stories, for example, or how for some it felt like such a relief when they stopped taking the pill because of severe side effects. And I see it in my own circles and throughout my volunteering job too. Women my age stopped taking the pill and resorting to other non-hormonal methods of contraception. We need to know more about the side effects or on the impact of contraception through reliable research, instead of making this a strict pro or contra hormones discussion. We should in fact be pleased that women are taking the time to get to know their bodies and are actively taking charge of their reproductive health. But the question remains, how can we take the discontent and the skepticism of young people serious? And the good thing is, it is only because there is such an easy access to contraception in Belgium that there is space to explore and search which one fits best. No need to think about getting an IUD that outlives a conservative president who's not keen on women's rights or bodily autonomy, if you know what I mean. The role of healthcare providers in this process is key, having a safe environment to explore the option best suited for your own needs. This currently fails when medical staff is too focused on the effectiveness as a criterion, what in practice leads to a choiceless choice for women, as you already said. After all, if we're only focusing on effectiveness, then no one should be using a condom or a pill, right? With little trust in healthcare providers, young people search the internet or social media for information, what makes them an easy prey for misinformation and confirmation bias. And that brings me seamlessly to my next point, the importance of education on contraception. And with that, I'm afraid I started off with the good news about our governments, because recently the Flemish government, the other government in Belgium, got rid of the learning goals that included CSC in schools. They were replaced by a vague reference to health and development, but with no overview of what young people are learning in class or any guidance for teachers, which leaves the extent of the discussed topics to the open-mindedness of the teacher in question. Not to mention what this means in combination with the increasing interference of certain overbearing parents in what gets taught in school concerning sexual education. For me, CSE is a part of prevention and implementation of basic human rights. It's not only learning exclusively about heteronormative and biology-based sex, with no room to talk about pleasure or anything else besides penetration. It's unbelievably important to teach a broader and honestly more realistic concept of what sex can be, how consent works, and how to navigate all of this as a young person. In this broader vision of sex ed, it's also important to make young men aware of their responsibility in contraception and how to talk with their partners about it. And let me be clear about this. It should not depend on luck to get informed on basic knowledge about your own body, health, and sexuality. Unfortunately, this is currently not how the Flemish government is approaching CSE, which is very concerning, actually. Because what good is it if young people have more access to reimbursed contraception, but cannot make an informed decision on it, nor navigate the complicated landscape that is sexuality and relationships? I want to congratulate EPF and everyone involved in this much needed research. Also, thank you for inviting me to share my opinion. And I'll close with this statement. Even though Belgium has a green color in the atlas, we have to dare ask the question of what we can do to make our contraception policies even more inclusive. And make sure we reinforce the gray policies in action with good education, research, and evaluation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Maud and Marina. Now the floor is yours. Neil unfortunately has to leave us, but thank you so much, Neil, for the presentation and your work.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm very happy to be here with you today, and very happy to see all of you who came today to see our new atlas and to discuss the challenges in access to contraception. I have a challenging task to speak after all these charismatic speakers and our great hosts, but I will try to give you a short overview, very short overview of the study that we have conducted, that reiterates also some of the points that Maud mentioned and other speakers mentioned. So I'll ask to click, please. Okay, so I will present you our study on exploring contraceptive awareness among young people. And we teamed up with Kantar, and the study was supported by Organon. And it's worth mentioning that it's our second study, and also the fact that from the study that we did early in 2022, not much has changed. But this study particularly looked at one phenomenon of what is happening actually at the consultation. So what do young people, what kind of information do young people receive at the consultation? So there is a slide on that. And so next slide, we will just quickly go over methodology. We established a 5 minutes quantitative survey, and we questioned young people in 15 countries, aged from 18 to 30, half men and half women. And the study was translated into local languages. And next slide. So we already showed you this slide, but I added it here nevertheless, just to show again how most effective contraceptive methods are not the ones that are most used. And in Germany, it's already, the condom is becoming on #1. So it's even outreach the pill, which is even more unreliable. And next slide, please. And I will ask you to 2-3 clicks so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the overall picture of the current usage of any contraception by country. So here we ask the question, are you or your partner currently using any contraceptive method? And you can see that Spain, Portugal, followed by Germany, have quite high usage. These are also the countries that have good policies, good access, so it's corresponding. Portugal, for example, provides free contraception in youth centers and state-run clinics. It's also universal coverage in Portugal. Next, and one more click. We move to a specific question. Which contraceptive methods have you ever heard of? And I'm sorry, it's very small here, but when I did it, it was more visible. So the first, the 2 bars in the circle in red, you can see that it's male condoms and pill that the young people that answered, they said yes, and that is 80% both times. And the other ones are really half is IUD, half of them, implant is very little, and injection is even less, so on the last place. Next slide. So now source of information. First, you can see it's internet. And then it is gynecologists, which is good. But what is very striking is that school, so if you click it's only 7%. So the school is 7%, which also questions about the quality of and trust that young people have into sexual education that they received at school. Next slide is quite interesting. This is the blue bars are answers to the question, what method of contraception are you currently using? So the longest bars that you can see, the highest, are the ones on condom and pill. And the ones that are very low in the oval are the long-acting ones, injection, IUD, and implant. So they're quite low. So There is also an interest, if you look at the graph, you can see actually a correlation that young people actually follow the advice of the doctor. But then the question is, why are these the only ones, the only methods that are recommended? So, and not the ones that are more effective. So I believe that young people should, and also adults should get all the variations of contraception so that they can choose based on their needs. Next slide is, please. Next, yeah. So again, so here, over 90% of young people report that healthcare provider explained to them pill and male condoms. After consultation, they were asked, and then 30% only about implants, IUDs, and injections. And we come to the last slide. That was a little bit crowded. So here you can see that the bars that are below are the ones that, so the orange ones are the ones on long-acting contraception, and you can only see that Sweden and another click, UK, are the ones where it's was discussed. The rest of the bars are all in blue, and that is again male condoms and pill. That is in the majority. In all countries, you can see more or less the same distribution. And the final slide I will look in with you is barriers in access. So what are the reported barriers? And the first three that are worth mentioning is that lack of knowledge of contraception among my young people. Cost of contraception in my country is too high. That is why also Atlas looks into whether the contraception are covered, because as you know, pills, for example, are not expensive, but some other insertion of IUD or an implant, they represent a quite high one-time cost, so they should be also covered. That is why we look in the Atlas at long-acting contraception coverage. So cost is a problem, and healthcare providers do not discuss all options. So this is also a problem that young people in the study reported. And the final slide is our recommendations. So we come to conclusion that what stands out in societal research is that healthcare providers are still not providing the patients with information on the whole range of contraceptive available. I also had myself this kind of experiences, as we already are very sincere to each other. When after I had my child, I also was consulting the doctor, and the only suggestion I had was pill, no questions, and buy. So this is in Belgium, where it's a top actually country in Europe. So what happens in other places is also yeah, interesting and maybe challenging. So and then we need to, recommendations is we need to train healthcare providers to provide high quality contraceptive counseling, including all methods. On the other side, we also need to empower young people to ask, to demand, so that you go into the office of your doctor with knowledge that you can ask, you can pose questions. And finally, we want to insist that governments do more to provide information online and also occupy spaces where young people are actually going, because sometimes it's a website, but also sometimes it's social media, it's different platforms and so on. So we need to occupy that space also with evidence-based information. So I come to conclusion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marina. Thank you. We have a wonderful audience today. Thank you for being here. So I would like to open the floor for questions to our panelists for about 5 minutes and before closing, and then we can enjoy some coffee and contraception chocolate as a tradition which studies. Would anyone like to ask a question, maybe share a remark or a comment?
Hello, thank you very much for hosting this event, and congratulations on the work you have been doing for this past 8 years on the Atlas. I was just thinking that one of good point also to take a look at, and I'd like to know maybe what your opinion on this is that sometimes you have to combine two methods, a barrier method concerning sexually transmitted diseases and another contraception, for example, the pill or something like this for some concerns. So I believe this could be also maybe another element to see. I don't know if you have any information on how this plays around the young, the youth here in Europe. Thank you.
I'm not an expert, as I showed during the quiz, so I think that I would leave that to the experts to reply.
Atlas doesn't look at this question, but of course, both are very important because one is barrier method and another one is so barrier methods is the only one that we have condoms that protects you from STI. Then the hormonal contraception protects you from getting pregnant. And in many cases, you need to do both. But this is, I think, falls under the recommendation that healthcare providers should provide all possible options that are relevant at this point of life of this person. Because barrier ones, after, if you are in a long-term relation, in some cases, you don't need it. So unless the other person has HIV or, yeah. But I cannot answer more detailed, unfortunately, because I didn't gather information on this.
Maybe just to complete, but it's obviously two different issues. However, I do believe that it is today a subject of concern for all of us about like the rise of actually STIs and STDs in the youth. And it is also linked actually to the economical situation of a lot of countries. We had a few years ago when it was actually a really quite a dramatic economical situation in Greece, for example, a rise of HIV and AIDS in these countries. So obviously these are two different issues. However, when one goes bad, the other often goes worse or equally. So it is obviously a subject of concern. And today, when especially we think about sex ed, and you were actually really thorough about that subject, it is obviously two options and two things that needs to be considered in the education programs and process. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to point out a question about changes in confidentiality by the fact that the national health system changes by digitalization. So is that one of the points you consider?
Well, maybe from a more general policy perspective, when it comes to privacy and the application of privacy regulations in the European Union, they are the most strict privacy laws in the world, and they are applied usually quite well by member states. Some member states go a bit step further. Some member states are at the bare minimum of what the European law and GDPR mandates. I think that it may be that some people might have concerns about their the privacy of their medical records. I would like to maybe take this opportunity to remind that we cannot ever be 100% sure, but we can also not be 100% sure when there's only paper records and they might also be stolen or lost or any other form of breach of those records. I think that it's more like, personally, I think that it's more like an unfunded claim fueled by some groups who have a lot of mistrust for everything that has to do with digitalization. And I do not think, I really don't think that it's something that is widespread, a widespread problem, but I do think that it leads to a lot of not fair concerns. That's my personal opinion. And I think that we have to ensure that our systems are well in place and that our watchdogs are well in place and well financed. And I think that's working quite well. Again, when there are breaches, they're serious, they're being researched, and some companies have already been fined at all levels in member states. So if I look at the Netherlands, like the fines that companies are getting on issues of privacy are quite high. So I think that we have to trust the system and be very vigilant, but not to discredit the system beforehand.
The thing that you mentioned is actually quite right. So there is obviously something today in Europe that we can be really proud of, like for the security of our system. what should maybe worry us, especially today, about tech is not actually the technology, because the technology is something that is very secured, is the people that are today controlling some of the firms that are actually using those technologies. We are today really ahead in the parliament talking about obviously generative AI, and we talked together before about these issues and about the big tech. You know that we are in a, and we will stay, I think, for a few months in a really big debate around what should we do as the European Union about, well, Elon Musk and all of these, companies, because obviously they run it with, a political agenda. So that is what is worrying us today. It is not the technology in itself. It is what maybe can happen when people with anti-rights and obviously anti-woman agenda are controlling some companies that can have then access to some information. And when we were talking before about apps that can track some of our daily lives and some of our, obviously private information, that is something that is really worrying for us in the EU. And that's why we should do everything we can to make sure that the DSA, for example, and other really important texts that were passed in the last mandate are actually well applied in the Union. That's it.
Maybe to add to that, Emma, because I think it's very, very good point. The Commission is working now on extra cybersecurity measures for the health sector, based on the threats assessments and the incidents which have been reported. So I think that's also a good step. Please.
I would like to say that I'm talking from the other side. We talk about contraception and use of contraception. And I can say, as a field worker in a family planning center, that people are worried about the choice they made. And because it's reimbursed, it's for free if you have your assurance. So some people are worried about the confidentiality of the information. It's for their parents, it's for their husband, and so on. So I'm not talking about big tech that's trying to recuperate information. I'm talking about daily life worries about access to contraception.
And do I understand it correctly that people are concerned that their information might be shared with or accessed, it would be the right word, by their partners or parents, or because that's in a digital system. So they're concerned about things like stealing data or hacking or
doctors. If you go to a family planning center to have information about contraception, perhaps you don't want your MG, medical practitioner, the other one, to know everything about it. It's the same question for abortion. So it's not, but I think it's a point that's important to think about. The digitalization makes that you have other questions to address.
Yes, and that's exactly, because I think it's a very fair point, and I think that's exactly what I was trying to convey. Like, we have a lot of good systems in place to avoid that unauthorized people, including in this healthcare system. I mean, I don't know the case for every member state, to be honest, but in my member state, you can ask your information to be shielded from anyone else at the doctor's practice, for example, especially when it's not something related to real medical conditions, which might, be needed to share because of risk to life or because you need medicines or any other reason. So I think that we have also a responsibility, especially working in the field, to reassure people that thankfully we have laws and regulations in place which protect them from that sort of interference. And I think that, again, we can be quite reassured as Europeans if I compare that to, for example, my own experience in America about the confidentiality of patient records. Yeah.
Actually, it's a very good point because moving out of Europe some years ago, we did a project in South Caucasus, where also I'm from, and there is this issue of confidentiality that if a young person goes to the clinic, the doctor can go and tell your parents how your child came. So this is something that is a phenomenon also in other countries, unfortunately. And this is why in the recent WHO report on AI, they explain that AI, when you go on different bots and AIs, and you ask, it replaces these exact needs that of confidentiality, of being non-judgmental, because AI is not judgmental. So that is why more and more people turn to AIs to ask questions and receive answer, and they know that it's safe. But then this opens another Pandora box of who is behind this AI, and if the information provided there is actually correct. I've tried some and it seemed okay, but I don't know to what details and what other people are asking. You know, sometimes you have a more detailed question that you need a real expert advice. So this is why one of the Atlas recommendation was that we have to monitor these fertility apps, we have to monitor these AIs and the information that is provided. It's now a new area that is not actually controlled. And even ICPT program of action that we all base our actions on, it was adopted in 1994 when this all didn't even exist. So we need something you know, on a global level that covers this and protects us also from misinformation and also usage of us in the falling prey to, you know, anti-choice agenda and so on.
We take one last question back in the room and then we will go to the closing.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, I work for Médecins du Monde, and my question was around, given where migration policy is going towards in Europe, do you share the concern that in terms of access to health is going to be more and more difficult for undocumented migrants, and especially on contraceptive use, sexual health rights in general? So did you look at this in the Atlas, and also do you just share this concern that less and less people are going to have access? I mean, this kind of vulnerable populations. Thank you.
No, this is it's very, very important, especially with the influx of migrants that we have. We will look into this. We looked this year in what Turkey is doing. We received this report, so we reflected it. It's not one of the criteria, but I believe it should be. How are the undocumented people without insurances, how are they treated overall, not only on SRHR, on all that? Sometimes you have also the risk that if you go to the doctor, you will be denounced and deported. So people are also afraid to go, even if the service is there. Then they are registered, and then they don't know of their destiny. So definitely, it's something that needs very close attention. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's actually a really important topic, especially because when we are saying that we are feminists, it doesn't mean that we only care about European women born in Europe, but also all women in the world, and especially the ones who are fleeing either misery or, you know, war. Today, of course, we see a rise in Europe of anti-migrant policies, of criminalization of migrants. It is something really worrying, and I do believe that it is, I'm talking for myself, obviously, and maybe for my group, but I do believe that the policies that are today ruling the Frontex, for example, program is something that is dangerous for women and for migrants. And as humanists, I don't believe that it should go that way. We also know today that women, when they're going through migration, are most likely to be victims of violences. I think that the numbers are quite high. I wouldn't quote them in worry of making a mistake, but we know that when they arrive in Europe, a lot of them, I think like a crushing majority of them have gone through gender violence. gender-based violence, that some of them have been through rape and other violences and crimes. And obviously, when all of these women who then arrive to Europe are criminalized and being, well, I would say, victimized, not victimized, but like, harmed, rather than being helped and being brought into a welcoming system, obviously the way that they are cared for in, like we say, a 360 degrees care system is actually not there. So I obviously believe that if we want all women in Europe, whether they are European or not, to be cared for, to be looked at, and to be considered as human beings who have the right to choose, obviously we also have to change some of our policies today, especially concerning migrations. And today, obviously, as Europeans, I do believe that the best is not done.
Thank you, Emma, for this call to action at the end. Thank you so much for the questions. I would just like to share a few closing remarks. First of all, it has been a real pleasure to share this panel with my co-panelists, with Neil and Joanna, who had to leave already. Thank you so much for the EPF for this 8th edition of the Contraception Atlas, and all the teams of the MEP offices and also from EPF for the organization. On the content of today, I would like to start with a quote which I read a few weeks ago, and it was about the rule of law, and it was about the rule of law in Poland. So what Joanna said was very relevant, and that is, you can't unscramble an egg. Once you break something, it's extremely difficult to put it back together. And that's what we're seeing with the 1 step forward, 3 step backwards, 2 step forward, 3 step backwards. We are here entangled in a fight to not turn the clock back 50 years. And to reinstate the importance of what it is turning the clock back 50 years, maybe some of you have read the wonderful short story of Annie Ernaux, a Nobel Prize winner, Happening, about her experience with an undesired pregnancy and the abortion which followed in France in 1963, I believe. I read it 2 weeks ago. It was haunting. I cannot take some of the images out of my mind. And that's a future that some groups and some people also in this house want for women and girls, not only in Europe, but also around the world. With success, because we're seeing already from the moment of the victory of Donald Trump, and especially he's coming into power in January, how they have been, first the gag rule, now they're dismantling USAID, and it's all part of a bigger plan to put women back behind the kitchen counter, as we say also in Dutch. So I think that it's really important that we keep reminding ourselves, from young people to older people and everything in between, what enormous advances we have made in the last few years. As Emma said, we are really standing on the shoulders of the many, particularly women, also some men allies who came before us, and that's something that we cannot just throw away or give away. I think it's encouraging to see countries moving forward. Neil has told us about that. I think it's very concerning to see 3 countries, European Union member states, at the bottom of this list. It shows that economic power, welfare does not have anything to do with government policies. I would also like to remind Hungarian colleagues from other political groups as well, and also the government in the country, that it's not really working, everything they're doing, because I just looked at their fertility rates, and they're a bit better than in some other countries, but they're also not fantastic. And Orban has been already for more than 10 years in power. So there's obviously a correlation between other good policies for families and more children, but fighting contraception and not respecting women's rights is not one of those. Maud talked about the importance of listening to the youth, understanding what the needs are, not approaching contraception and sexual education as just purely a biological thing, but also something which has to do with a broader experience of knowing your own body and also having pleasure with it. Joanna also mentioned pleasure at the beginning of the session, and I think that's really, really important because thanks to contraception, millions of women have been allowed to experience pleasure for the first time in centuries. And just to close and to share also the experience of Emma, I have been a very thankful user of contraception and still the pill, condoms, IUD with and without hormones, and the morning after pill. And I have 3 daughters and they're very young. They're not at that age yet, but I really wish for them that they have a future where wherever they are in Europe, at least wherever they are in Europe, they can also make their own choices. So again, thank you so much for being here today. We will keep working on this subject from the European Parliament. You know who your allies are. Don't hesitate to reach out, and have a great afternoon and enjoy the coffee and the contraceptive chocolates. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was good. Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah, oh, sorry, I just folded it.
You can take it.
Yeah, let me just maybe, because
There
otherwise
are
it
many.
looks- What do you want to have us? Here?
That's good.
Thank you so much. Oh, Julia, thank you so much. Oh, so nice. Thank you. Maybe we can hold the chocolates as well. Thank you. Thank you all. It was wonderful.